Hey, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Thursday Night Hockey Show. Solo show tonight. It's going to be a very quick show tonight. We're running out of games to talk about. So, but we'll talk about each of the series that are going on. We'll talk about the NHL draft lottery, which we'll lead off with here in a second. Let's talk about tonight's games. Tonight, May 11th, we've got two games on the docket. Starting at 7 o'clock, it's the Devils and the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes can close out that series tonight. And then tonight at 9:30, it is the Seattle Kraken and the Dallas Stars in Dallas. That series is 2-2, so no closeout tonight, but we'll get a team with the advantage. I think the 67% of teams that take a 3 games to 2 lead will win the series. So we'll see what happens there. Thank you for joining us on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. I don't have LinkedIn on this one, but thank you for joining us there. Give us a like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about the show. Make comments if you have a question about hockey. Feel free to comment. We'd love to hear your comments. You'll see them scroll up on the screen. For those of you on TikTok, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you joining us. Give us a tap on the screen. Send those hearts out because that does is it gets more people engaged in the conversation as well. Gets more people watching the show. But yeah, tonight. So we've got the two games. Um, but let's talk about some of the news in the world of hockey. We've had a little bit of news happen this evening or this today in the last week. First one is that the Chicago Blackhawks have won the NHL draft lottery. Um, that was an interesting drawing. So if you didn't watch the drawing, everything went to form. Like there was no team made a massive jump. You didn't have any team like in the 11, 12, 13 range jump all the way up. Um, but you ended held pretty much to form until the final three picks. And they were supposed to dump to a commercial and then do the final three picks. But Kevin Weeks, the analyst for ESPN and the NHL Network, accidentally let slip that Columbus had lost their positioning and dropped a third. So, kind of an anticlimactic moment there. The Chicago Blackhawks jumped Columbus and jumped Anaheim, won the draft lottery. I think one of the things that we should talk about with Chicago winning the draft lottery is this. I think it disabuses the idea, the notion that there are hockey gods or there is karma. Because if there's a franchise that deserves nothing, it's the Chicago Blackhawks. Here's something that's kind of disgusting. The night that Connor Bedard was announced that he was going to end up going to Chicago, um, Chicago sold like $4 million in jerseys. They got fined $2 million for that Kyle Beach incident, the mismanagement of the sexual abuse claims sexual abuse of Kyle Beach, um, and there have been plenty of examples of teams like Arizona who lost two first and a second round pick for working out people too early. Um, and some other draft picks that have been forfeited for various reasons that were not anywhere near as serious as what happened to the Chicago Blackhawks. Joel Quinville, yeah, he's still facing the fact that he's been kind of shut out of the league since he had to resign from being Florida's head coach when that all this erupted. But Chicago has not faced any consequences for that. Also, it hasn't faced any consequences for being just absolutely mismanaged last season. How many young players like Alex DeBrincat and Dylan Strome that they just let walk for pennies on the dollar and had nothing to show for it. And now they get this kid who's a transformative player. Now, I'm not going to say that next year Chicago is going to be right up there and competing for a playoff spot. It might make it a little more, you know, I guess the way to think of it is going to make it a much more sexy destination for free agents to take a look at Chicago. But I still think even if you bring in a bunch of free agents like teams like Ottawa and Detroit did last year, no guarantee that you're going to build a team up to be playoff competitive. So, um, it does it speed up Chicago's rebuild? Absolutely. Do they deserve it? Absolutely not. Um, honestly, I would have loved to see Bedard go to maybe not Anaheim. Columbus would have been a good landing spot. I'm glad as a Sabres fan that he's not in the East. That he'll be toiling out in the Western Conference. Um, butting our heads up against guys like Connor McDavid. That's fine. I would have liked to see him go to Arizona. Arizona's always been screwed when it comes to the draft lottery. Same with Columbus. They've both been kind of screwed when it comes to the draft lottery. Um, but yeah, goes to Chicago. Chicago gets rewarded for all its bad work, and the tank works. I know a lot of people question this after question Gary Bettman during the middle of the season, talking about the number of teams out west, especially tanking specifically for Connor Bedard. You have your Anaheims, you had your Chicago, you had San Jose just having miserable seasons. And he said they weren't doing it because they have a weighted draft lottery. Well, yeah, it didn't really work this time. Yeah, Chicago moved up two places, but um, either way, any of those tank teams that tanked were rewarded. I'm not crying too much for Anaheim for moving back one. They're going to get a guy like Adam Fantilli. Um, even Columbus is going to get a decent defenseman. I think the big defensive prospect is going to go to Columbus. So they're going to build a pretty good defensive pairing back there in Columbus with Simicek or Simic or whatever his name is that they drafted last year. So um, it's I don't cry for any of those teams, but I do feel bad for Columbus because they've been screwed out of the draft lottery several times. Arizona the same way. Arizona does get both picks. There was a contingent pick on the first round pick that they had from Ottawa, and that pick it was I think top five protected. So if they had won the draft lottery, it was 12th. It would only moved up to the second position. Um, uh, I, it doesn't it didn't hit, so that Iowa pick stays with Arizona based off of that Jacob Chicken trade. So Arizona's got two high draft picks, I think 6 and 12. They could parlay that up if a team ahead of them so chooses, but I doubt that a team will move back um, because that is a pretty top heavy draft coming up. So let's see. Other news today: the Flyers and national TV analyst and Flyers analyst Keith Jones have agreed to Jones becoming president of the Flyers. So he'll take over that position, representing the Flyers at Board of Governors meetings and things like that. President of hockey operations. So, of course, that team is in a full rebuild. I think they have the seventh overall pick in this next draft. Of course, you have the volatile John Tortorella as coach. Um, I think he's pretty safe. Right now, I don't think that Jones is going to come in and fire Tortorella immediately. There are too many openings right now, and it's. I think the pickings will be pretty slim on bringing in a quality head coach to replace Tortorella. So I think Tortorella is safe for now, and unless the Flyers get off to just an awful start next season, then we might see the buzzard circling. Um, Let's see. ESPN had a cool discussion on the number of coaching vacancies that we have right now. Big news this week. I actually reacted audibly when I saw the news that Gerard Gallant had been relieved of duties by the New York Rangers. Interesting thing with Gerard Gallant is that he has been seen as a player's coach. I heard that there are some rumblings that some of the players didn't play well with Gerard Gallant this time in the Rangers, but he had been dumped pretty hard both previous jobs. When he took over Florida, he took Florida from a team that had missed the playoffs for like a decade and brought him back to the playoffs, only to get fired the next season, early in the season, like November. And then, of course, he was the first coach of the Vegas Golden Knights, took them to the Stanley Cup year one, and the second year, like in November, got fired again. And um, I didn't think it was players either time on those 2 instances. I think he has an issue with management. He rubs management the wrong way. But Gerard Klahn is a quality coach that has gotten every team that he's coached to new heights. Like, he took the Rangers, to the conference finals last year, I think, which is probably a year earlier than they should have been. Sure, they had a disappointing playoffs this time, but, um, I don't know that I would have laid that on his feet, that they didn't get past the first round this time. I think it was more his players, failure to, take advantage of a 2-0 series lead and close out the Devils. But, yeah, so Gerard Gallant's out there. He's one of, looks like 6 coach well, no, I'm sorry, 5 coaching opportunities that are out there now. The Anaheim Ducks, who will, like I said, get Adam Fantilli, um, uh, added to their roster with, Trevor Zegras and some, good young players in Anaheim. Calgary, uh, a veteran team that was in the playoffs, made it to the second round last season before flaming out this season. Good quality players on that team, Jonathan Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri, some good stuff on the back end. I think they just got tired of the Daryl Sutter style. Columbus, a work in progress. Um, you got some good young players. You got Johnny Hockey, who signed there mysteriously in the offseason and didn't quite work out year one, but they'll get some help on the back end for in the draft. And then your Rangers. I mean, that's gonna be a coveted position, and there's been rumors, and it may kind of fall into place depending on what happens in the Toronto series. If Toronto goes out, there's still rumblings that, Dubas and, Sheldon Keefe may be, let go, for especially if they, go out in game 5. There's rumors that if that happens, then Keefe goes to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Pittsburgh Penguins get let go of Mike Sullivan, and Sullivan goes to the Rangers. There's another name out there I mentioned a moment ago, Joel Quenneville. I know he's kind of persona non grata, and I know that there's some steps that the NHL will probably make him take before he can reassume a coaching position. But he's probably the best coach, maybe not best person, but best coach that's still out there. Um, and I'm sure that one of these teams is gonna try and take a flyer on him to bring him in. Um, and I honestly think that it's probably gonna be the Rangers, to bring Quenneville in. The Caps are also looking for a coach. Caps are an interesting situation. They're drafting uh, late 10s of the or well, late top 10 of the first round. I think 8th is where they're picking. They've got an aging roster. Did not make the playoffs this year. I think they're more on the back end of they'll be struggling if they try and make the playoffs this year. Probably a wild card position if they do. I don't see it though. All the other teams in the Eastern Conference are getting far better than the Caps are. Um, but that'll be an interesting situation to get who's going to take over the Caps and what are they going to do to rebuild that roster? Because I don't think it's going to be good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference. Even with Alexander Ovechkin, even with all the injury issues they had this year, I just don't think that there's enough juice in that lineup to be competitive moving forward. But that's it. That's right now the coaches: Anaheim, Calgary, Columbus, Rangers, and Caps. Nobody's made any moves. I'd expect as we get closer to the draft, we'll start seeing some names pop out and coaches being named in some of these franchises. Um, the other big news of the week is that we really have not had a whole lot of competitive games in round two. The round two's been kind of a snooze fest, and combined with the fact that we have fewer games as few as one game per night during round two, even though we've got 4 series going concurrently. Um, it's hard because you're kind of forced to watch. If you're a hockey fan, you're kind of forced to watch the game or turn off the game and watch something else, maybe baseball or um, old football games. Who knows? Maybe XFL. I have no idea. But it's been hard to watch a lot of these games because it's I don't mind high scoring because there have been goals aplenty. I just want a high scoring game where it's like 7-6 rather than 8-4, which is what one game we saw this playoffs. Um, all right, so let's take a look at the series. We got two games tonight. One rolling in about 15 minutes, and I'm going to do one burning question for each of these series. And one actually was answered as I was waiting for the show to start. So let's take a look at the Devils versus the Hurricanes. Game five is tonight at 7 p.m. Carolina leads the series 3-1, so they can close it out on home ice and move on to the Eastern Conference Final. Be the first team to move on. Florida had that chance last night, but they failed. So Devils or Hurricanes, game five. The one burning question for this series is who starts in net. Like this has been one of the most uncompetitive series. Like it's been a snooze fest. Unless you're like a fan of the Carolina Hurricanes, you probably enjoyed this one so far. But just a neutral observer, this one's been a snooze fest because none of these games have been that competitive at all. Carolina won game one 5-1, game two 6-1, which wasn't, I didn't panic when I saw those two scores because that was almost exactly what the Rangers did to New Jersey before they got to game three. Game three, I thought, yeah, this is what I'm expecting. New Jersey's going to come out and kind of make those adjustments they needed to make. They did. They won 8-4. And then game 4 happened, and New Jersey just they don't have answers right now for the Carolina Hurricanes. That forecheck that the Hurricanes run just absolutely neutralized the speed of a young, New Jersey team. So, 6-1 was the final in game 4. So again, no competitive games in the series. So the burning question I have for the Devils, and it was answered just a minute ago, is who do you go with in net? Akira Schmidt started game 1 and 2. Got shelled, was pulled in both games replaced by Vitek Vanacek. They went with Vitek Vanacek in game 3, and he got the 8-4 victory. Giving up 4 goals is still a little concerning, and that was confirmed on game 4 where he gave up, I think, 4 goals before he was pulled in that game. And so goaltenders pulled in 3 of the 4 games for the New Jersey Devils. So who was going to take net in game 5? That just came out. There are 3 options. You could have done Vitek Vanacek again, who has been their starter all season. You have the young guy, Akira Schmid, who won the New York Rangers series, played really well, but struggled in the beginning of this series. And then they have Mackenzie Blackwood, who's a decent-ish backup, but hasn't played a whole lot. So there was some thought that maybe you bring in a Mackenzie Blackwood, have a new netminder back there, the one that hasn't been shelled in the last week. And but no, they're going with Akira Schmid for game 5. Which Akira Schmid did we get? The one that shut the door on the New York Rangers, the one that opened the door wide open for Carolina in games 1 and 2. I really think Carolina wins this game and closes the door on this series and moves on to the Eastern Conference Finals. And the way they're playing defense, even though they've had the issues with their forwards dropping like flies, they might get Tuvo Teravainen back next week. Um, they've been scoring, and it's been scoring by committee. They finally got defensemen chipping in this last game with Brent Burns scoring. Can't remember who else scored, but a couple of defenseman goals, which I think were the first of the playoffs for the Carolina Hurricanes, even though they had spent most of the season as a very good defensive scoring team. So, um, but yeah, that's the question. The question I had was who will be in net. I think a secondary question is: can we get a competitive game? Can we get a 2-1 final? Can we get a 3-2 final? Can we get an overtime game in this thing? Because honestly, it has been brutal to watch these games. Um, this has not been a fun series. So, all right, let's talk about the other game tonight, the other series, and that is the Kraken at the Stars. Game 5 is tonight at 9:30. This series is even at 2. Um, But outside of game 1, this one's been pretty brutal too. Games have been pretty much over. The game 2 was okay, decent for Dallas, um, as far as competitiveness goes, but the last 2 games, blowout for Seattle 7-2, and then a 6-3 Dallas win. And they were controlled from beginning to end in that game. They looked really good in that game. Can we get a competitive game 5? Whoever takes this game gets the advantage in the series. They only have to win 1 out of 2. And then the winner of game 5 in a tied series generally wins the series. So, this will be an interesting, game. The Stars are at home, but the Kraken have been really good at on the road this year, especially in the playoffs. Ask Colorado. Let's see. Um, Burning question I have for this series is: Can Jake Ottinger, who's a phenomenal goaltender, I love Jake Ottinger. I think he's one of the best goaltenders in the league. But he's struggled in this series. Did not look good in game 1. That goal that was scored in overtime was a stinky goal. Looked pretty decent in game 2, getting the 4-2 win. Got shellacked in game 3 and, had a decent outing in game 4, but still gave up 3 goals. Can we get him to put together a couple of decent outings to right the ship for Dallas? It was this point in the Minnesota series where he clamped down and pitched a couple of quality outings for a goaltender to wrap up that series in 6. Can he do it this time? That's the burning question I have for this series. Let's take a look at the Panthers and the Maple Leafs. I've enjoyed this series immensely. This has been by far the closest series. Look at all those one goal games that we've had. Um, these have been really good hockey games to watch, not only because the Leafs have lost 3 of them. Um, I absolutely love the fact that the Leafs lost 3 of them, but they've been competitive. So, I can sit down and watch the game and know that by the 3rd period, I'm not going, "Geez, what am I gonna do later?" Um, in this series, the curious thing for the Maple Leafs, and probably the reason why they haven't won a game in this series or hadn't won a game in the series until yesterday was, what happens if, let's say they get eliminated tomorrow and Austin Matthews does not score a goal in this series, has not scored a goal in this series so far. What happens? Like, Matthews has 1 year left on his contract. Let's say this causes a shakeup in Toronto. Where does he end up? Does he stay in Toronto for the year and get traded at the deadline? Do they trade him this summer? Who picks him up? The always the rumor about Arizona wanting Austin Matthews to come home. Do they dump all 3 picks to the Maple Leafs to accelerate their rebuild? Um, I mean, the Coyotes have picks to spare at this point. So, I mean, they could put together a package that would make sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs if they are gonna go that direction of, "All right, this hasn't worked. Um, let's strip down some parts, get some parts in, and see what we can do from there." Um, I don't know. I think that's intriguing. I think it's a very tempting, offer if Arizona comes calling with, maybe even 2 of those draft picks, those first round draft picks, the 2 high draft picks, and keeps the 3rd first round pick that they have, and then go for, um, a second, maybe a second round pick or maybe a player off their roster or some sort. Um, there's a deal to be had there. Um, but if Toronto is smart, they don't deal from a position of weakness this summer, and they give it some time. They do it during next season. Um, we're also, we don't know that Austin Matthews will be keen to sign a contract in Toronto, especially if he doesn't score in this series and has to spend the entire summer hearing the Toronto media blather about him. He may be very keen on getting out of Toronto. So, won't be the first player that the Toronto media has run out of town. All right, let's talk about the final series. and that is the Oilers and the Golden Knights. Game 5 is Friday at 10 p.m. The series is even at 2 games apiece. Um, this one has not been a very competitive series at all. The first game was kind of back and forth, but Edmonton just didn't have the goaltending in that game. They were able to tie it a couple times, but the Vegas Golden Knights took leads very shortly after getting tied. Edmonton comes back and wins a 5-1 victory. It looked completely opposite. Like the Vegas Golden Knights couldn't keep the puck out of their net, and Edmonton looked really solid on defense. Then game 3 flipped it back. The Vegas Golden Knights win 5-1. Jack Eichel had a goal and 2 assists. Vegas looked like they were going to take control of the series. It was the first game in Edmonton, and they really kept the crowd out of it. And then game 4, flip it back. It's the Edmonton Oilers winning 4-1. Vegas didn't look all that good. What is the impact of Laurent Brossoit getting injured? Going with Aiden Hill as your goaltender in the balance of the season or balance of the series for the Vegas Golden Knights. For Edmonton, can you put together 2 solid games to win a series? The defense, I don't know. Like the way that it's currently going, the ebbs and the flows favors the Vegas Golden Knights winning it in 7. But can Edmonton put together a couple solid games um, to win this series? Can we get a competitive game in this series? Um, the really the only value of watching these games is coming towards the end of the game. There have been some really good scraps. There's been some controversial stuff, and I haven't even checked to see if Alex Petrangelo got any supplemental discipline. I'll try and look that up here as we talk. But let's see, what does the Magic Twitter say? Oh, no, that's wrong. I've done it wrong. Oh, yeah, he's having a hearing today. Nothing's been announced, I don't think. But if he's having a hearing, it's probably gonna be 2 games. So, not only are Vegas down a goaltender, um, but they're probably losing their big horse on the blue line, Alex Petrangelo, for a couple games for, a slash on Leon Draisaitl, who is the leading scorer in the playoffs. Um, that would be devastating for the Vegas Golden Knights, and Petrangelo himself, I mean, if your team gets eliminated because you got a dumb suspension, it happened to Nazem Kadri. Um, what can you stay in Vegas, or will Vegas try and trade you out because you couldn't keep your cool in a game that you were already losing? Like the slash wasn't going to help you win the game by any stretch of the imagination. It was already garbage time. It was not smart to take that slash because it wasn't even like a hard slash. Um, you know, it wasn't Bobby Clark slashing the Russian player's ankle and breaking it. It was, a fairly light tap, but to do a slash that high and for no reason during the end of the game, that's just dumb. Um, so anyway, that's the news for hockey this week. I appreciate you joining us on. Let's see, we've got people on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. I appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you for joining us on the Tick of Talk. And if you're out there, give us a like, share, subscribe. Let people know you're watching the show, and we'll talk to everyone next week as we start. We'll be starting round 3, probably around the time of the show next week. So we'll have new series to talk about, these series to wrap up, and have some good news. So, all right, talk to you later, everybody, and yeah, I hope the Leafs lose tomorrow night. So, all right, have a good one, everybody.